Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Moser's temporary classroom away from violins. I'm so happy to see you here with me today. So thank you for taking this time to grow your brain and read a story with me. Today we are going to read a story about an amazing young girl, but first we need to plot where we are on the mood meter. So when we look at the mood meter, we have 4 zones that you can usually find yourself in at least one of these. First, we have our green zone, which is where we are if we are calm and ready to learn. Next, we have our yellow zone. This is where we're hanging out if we're excited. Maybe we're running around at recess. Maybe we have a little bit of extra energy in the classroom or at home. We have our red zone, which is where we hang out if we feel frustrated or irritated or maybe nervous or anxious. And then finally, we have our blue zone. This is where we are if we feel tired or maybe kind of sick or sad. Today, Mr. Moser is hanging out in the blue zone. We all have days or moments in our days where we might kind of hang out and go down to the blue zone, and that's okay. Today, I'm in the blue zone because it has been a very long couple weeks, and I feel tired. I've noticed that my back kind of hurts. I've been having some headaches, and the thing that I really have to keep in mind about when I'm in the blue zone is I tell myself 2 things. 1, if I'm in the blue zone, I know I'm not going to be there forever. So I tell myself, it'll be okay soon. 2, I also remind myself that it's okay to be sad sometimes. It's okay to hang out in the blue zone and to feel whatever emotions that you're feeling. So I might say to myself, I'm going to be okay. It's all right to be here right now. I know that soon I'll be happy again. A strategy that I use if I'm in the blue zone and I want to navigate away from that, maybe to the green zone, I might take a few deep breaths or I might have a cold glass of water. Lately, I've been finding myself in the blue zone a lot, and I've also been finding myself in the yellow zone, but not a really happy yellow zone. Sometimes I'll be in the yellow zone and feel kind of nervous or anxious. If I feel nervous or anxious or kind of sad, I always like to take a few sips of water because it helps me to bring myself back to my body and calm down a little bit. So, if you have been feeling in the blue zone lately, just like Mr. Moser, that's okay. A lot of us have been here. If not, that's okay too. Take a moment to think about what zone you are in right now. When you've thought of your zone, I want you to say a sentence with me. Think about what zone you're in. The sentence I want you to say is, today I'm in the, and then say the color of the zone you're in. For instance, you might say, today I'm in the red zone. What zone are you in today? Today I'm in the zone. Take a moment to think about why you might be in that zone today. Are there things that are happening in your life that are unexpected or maybe different than usual? When there are changes in our routine and what happens every day, it definitely can give us some big feelings, and that's okay. No matter what zone you're in, it is always good to talk about your feelings with someone that you trust. Maybe a friend or a sibling or even a parent or guardian too can always be great. So I encourage you to ask people that you live with or people that you are seeing, just to ask them how they're doing these days. And you can also share with them how you feel. Remember, you don't always have to say that you're happy or calm. It's okay to be honest about how you're feeling if you aren't feeling pretty good. So, today we are going to read a story about an amazing black woman named Ruby Bridges. Now, the coolest thing about Ruby Bridges is that before we all were born, Miss Moser was born, Miss Ruby Bridges was just a kid. And she was a little kid too. She was still in school. She was your age. And when she was this age, there was something that was happening in America called segregation. Now, the other day when I talked to you about racism, I forgot to mention something really important. I forgot to mention that racism is something that has been happening in our country for hundreds of years. Back in 1619, whoa, that's a long time ago, when people brought African American people to America as slaves, that is when racism started. After slavery ended, racism still continued for many, many years, and it still is going on today. There have, however, been small steps of progress that we have made as a people throughout these hundreds of years. One example is that about 40 years ago, in the 60s, black and white children were not allowed to go to school together. They weren't allowed to drink at the same drinking fountains. They weren't allowed to swim in the same swimming pools or play in the same playgrounds. They had to be separated from one another because people thought that it wasn't okay to play with people who looked different from you. Take a moment to think about how boring it would be if you only got to play with kids that looked exactly like you. I would have way less friends. So today we're going to learn a little bit about what segregation looked like and how this amazing child, Ruby Bridges, made a really big step for all of us to come together. This story is about Ruby Bridges. Let's read about Ruby Bridges by Ruby Bridges and Grace Macaron, illustrated by Cornelius Van Wright and Ying Hua Hu. Wow, when I read the author of this story, I noticed that this story is written by Ruby Bridges. When you read a story that's written by the person who the story is about, that's called an autobiography. So Ruby Bridges is telling us this important time and this story about her life. How lucky are we to be able to hear her story? A long time ago, and unfortunately still today, some people thought that black people and white people should not be friends. In some places, black people were not allowed to live in the same neighborhoods as white people. In some places, black people were not allowed to eat in the same restaurants as white people. In this illustration, I see that this mother and her child are trying to eat at this restaurant, and the person behind the counter is saying, "You can't eat here." How would it make you feel if somebody told you that you could not sit with them or eat with them just because of the way that you looked? I know it would make me really, really sad. And in some places, black children and white children could not go to the same schools. This is called segregation. The United States government said segregation is wrong. People should have a chance to live where they want, to eat where they want, and to go to school where they want. In 1960, Ruby Bridges went to kindergarten in a black school. She liked her school. She liked her teacher. She liked her friends. But there was a white school even closer to Ruby's house than the black school. The government said Ruby Bridges shouldn't be allowed to go to the white school. The school was called William Franz Elementary School. So when people say the government, they mean the people who headed that up. So the people who were in charge, who were making some of the big rules for other people to follow, they told Ruby Bridges that she cannot go to the school that's closer to her house because that was a white school. They wanted Ruby Bridges to go to a black school. Imagine how it would make you feel if you were not allowed to go to a school just because of the way that you looked. It might make me mad or sad. In 1961, Ruby was in first grade. Ruby's mother took her to the France school. Two marshals, a marshal is another word for someone who's kind of a police officer. Two marshals went with Ruby and her mother to make sure that they would be safe. Some people did not want Ruby to go to the white school. They stood in front of the school and yelled at Ruby to go away. Wow, these signs are so sad and mean. Some of them say, go back, go away, we don't want you. The people that are holding these signs are saying that they don't want Ruby Bridges to come to their school because she's black. That's not okay, and that's racist. The white parents took their children out of the school. Ruby was alone with her teacher, Mrs. Henry. Imagine how it would make you feel if you went to a new school and you didn't know anybody and you were very brave and walked in all by yourself and all of the children in the school left. I imagine that Ruby Bridges may have had her feelings hurt, but she still didn't give up. She still went to school every day, and she was still taught by the same teacher, even though there were no other kids in her class. I think she was very brave. This is her teacher. Ruby loved Mrs. Henry, and Mrs. Henry loved Ruby. Ruby was a very good student. She learned math. She learned how to read. Ruby wished the children would come back, but they never did. Then, when Ruby was in 2nd grade, the children began to come back to the school. At last, Ruby had friends to play with. Ruby was very, very happy. Many people read about Ruby in newspapers and books. A famous writer, John Steinbeck, wrote about Ruby. He wrote that Ruby was very brave. Why was Ruby so brave? Let's take a moment and think. Ruby was brave because she walked all by herself to a new school where she knew that she wasn't going to be welcomed at first. That's very scary. She was also brave because she didn't give up. She kept going to this school every day, even though she was by herself in the classroom with her teacher. How else do you think Ruby was brave? Ruby was brave because Norman Rockwell was an artist who painted a picture of Ruby. This painting became very famous. So here's Norman Rockwell. He's painting Ruby as she's walking into school by herself, escorted by these two marshals. The First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, wrote a letter to Ruby. The letter told Ruby that she was a good American. Now Ruby is all grown up, and she's still alive today. She is married. She has children. In 1996, Ruby and Mrs. Henry were both asked to be on a TV show. That was the first time they had seen each other in 35 years. Now they are together again. So, reading this story and talking about how racism is still in our lives today is a really difficult topic. Mr. Moser sometimes even feels uncomfortable or like she might make a mistake when we're talking about this, because I know that as a white person, there are a lot of things that I will never understand about racism and how it affects people. But I'm going to do my best to have conversations with you that let us talk about what we are noticing and let us acknowledge that it is all of our jobs to talk about what's happening today so that we can keep moving forward as a country and be brave like Ruby Bridges. So something that I want you to think about is if you were a student at school when Ruby Bridges came the first time, what is a way that you could make her have good thoughts about you? Would you want to be like the kids who just left the classroom because they were so scared that her skin color was different than theirs? Or would you want to be a kind person, someone who would give her good thoughts and be her friend? I know that if I think about this, I would love to imagine myself being inclusive and telling Ruby Bridges that I thought she was brave. When I think about what I would like to do if I had been in school with Ruby Bridges, that means that I also can think about what I can do right now. We know that racism is still happening in our country, so if you just thought of a way that you could make Ruby Bridges feel comfortable way back when it was not okay to have some of these conversations and when Black and white children did not go to school together, think about how you can be inclusive today. What's a way that you can help to stand up for and with your Black and brown sisters? Maybe it's noticing that there's someone who looks different than you on the playground and going over and saying hi. Maybe it's asking a question that you might not know the answer to instead of being too scared to ask it. I know that I've made a lot of mistakes when I talk about racism, and I know I'll probably continue to make mistakes. But knowing that I want to learn how to be a better ally, and I want to work with everyone else on making sure that the mean things that happened to Ruby Bridges when she was just a brave little girl stop happening, I know that we need to keep talking and moving forward. So, thank you for reading with me today. Thanks for having this conversation. I appreciate you so much. I think you are amazing, and I hope you have a great rest